It is time now to bring in our State House insiders to find out what is going on when it comes to the state budget, as both leaders from the House and the Senate are getting together trying to iron out some differences. Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist, Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist. Antoine, we go through this every year trying to beat the July 1st deadline. There's no reason to think we're not going to beat it this time around, right?
JR and Dave, this is that time of the year where we say what's hot and what's not. The hot things will make themselves out of the veto process if the governor decides to veto it, and hopefully sign into law will make its way to state agencies to fund the agencies, and from there the money will flow throughout the state of South Carolina. I really do believe in my heart this will be a good budget. I know it will be a healthy budget thanks to many of the resources that have come down from Washington, D.C. to South Carolina in order to do some good, to put some money back to the people who are so desperately in need. And so I'm very proud of what the potential could be. We never know what, in the end, the likelihood is going to be.
We're looking at a surplus this year, a significant surplus this year. The question, JR, is really going to be one of two things. How much of a tax cut is there going to be? And will there be a tax rebate? Senator Harvey Peeler, who is the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, really did try to push forward putting $1 billion back into the pockets of South Carolinians this year. That was money that is in the budget to be able to do so. That would be about $70 every month to the average household, which right now is a tank of gas. And that is one of those questions that the Budget Committee is going to be debating and working on as we finalize the budget, for them to come back and actually take it up for a vote June 15th.
I'm glad Dave brought up the idea of the tax rebate, because I think we have to be careful when we use those words, tax rebate or returning dollars to the taxpayers, because in lean times that may seem politically okay and the right thing to do from a conservative standpoint. But what that means when times are not so lean and times are not so well, what is that going to mean for the long-term bill of health financially for the state of South Carolina, in particular, middle-class working South Carolinians who usually have to share the brunt of when things are cut in state government, or really share the load when it comes to funding state government in South Carolina.
I want to move on now to gun violence, because it's been in the news a lot lately here in South Carolina and across the country. Most recently, of course, that mass shooting in Texas. But we've had our own issues with guns in South Carolina. We had the mall shooting back in April, and we had a number of shootings here in the month of May where a number of teenage lives have been lost. Dave, is there any kind of legislation over at the State House that can put a stop to any of this gun violence?
You really can't end gun violence without really changing people's lives. I mean, the reality of it is we do have guns. We have guns, and guns are in the hands of sometimes the wrong people. And when that happens, we have terrible things that go on. Right now, one of the things that we really need to address is the fact that we have more than 370 schools in South Carolina that do not have a school resource officer. And that is something that's going to need to be addressed, and that's one of those things that is in the works, but it won't be something that will be taken up by the legislature until they return in January, because it is not part of the agreement that was made between the House and the Senate in the sine die resolution.
I'm glad Dave brought that up. Look, this gun issue, we know it's a problem. To do nothing, I think, is an act of political malpractice. The fact of the matter is Republicans control every branch of government in this state. The House, the Senate, and all statewide constitutional officers. So the fact of not making school resource officers a priority in this budget, I think it falls on the shoulders of them. Now, when it comes to the issue of guns, look, it took 9 people being killed in Charleston, and we still cannot find bipartisan agreement to do something like close the Charleston loophole. I oftentimes hear my Republican friends, those I like and those who I sometimes agree with, and even those who I just totally dislike or can't find anything to agree on. They talk about the value of life. They talk about being pro-life. But pro-life doesn't just mean pro-birth. It means from the cradle to the grave. So if that means passing common sense gun reform to make so people who do not need to have a gun in their hand not have it, then that to me is putting value and emphasis on protecting life. We spent so much time talking about critical race theory and how that impacts children. We spent so much time fighting masks, and we know masks kept many of us safe and alive during the pandemic. But yet when it comes to an issue that continues to plague us, like gun violence and mass shootings and so forth, we can't find the political will or courage to do something. And so that's why people like me will quickly holler hypocritical when I hear people say, yeah, I'm pro-life, but I don't want to do anything to protect and add value to life.
I think it's a broad overstatement on that particular part to say that pro-life people are only about pro-birth, when the reality is we're working right now, Antoine, to address several things, and to politicize this issue right now while children's lives are hanging in the balance like that. I can't go there. Not tonight.
Well, Dave, you may not, you may call it politicizing. I call it speaking the good gospel truth, because the fact of the matter is, every time there's a shooting, I often hear, let's not politicize it. But days and months later, nothing happened from a legislative standpoint. We're talking about what lawmakers could do. And so part of lawmaking and making
Antoine,
laws,
legislation cannot change evil.
It's politics. I lost a dear friend in Charleston, South Carolina. So you can't tell me what pain feels like. Somebody I had worked with.
You and I both did, Antoine. Legislation cannot change evil. It cannot happen.
It may not be an address.
And the reality of it is, we've got to start addressing the evil that is there.
Legislation could have prevented Dylan Roof from getting a gun, closing the Charleston loophole, and yet Republicans in the General Assembly can't find the political courage to do something as simple as that. And so you can't tell me that it doesn't.
Legislation wouldn't have changed the shooting that took place in Texas because he bought the gun legally, Antoine.
Well, I'm not saying it would. I'm speaking to Charleston, South Carolina, and you can't say that, because truth be told, if they would have done some digging in his background and done a thorough background check, perhaps he would not have been one of those persons to have qualified for a gun.
We're going to have to leave the conversation there, guys. Thank you so very much, our State House insiders, Antoine Seawright and Dave Wilson.